In the Arizona Territory, a woman's silence was often mistaken for weakness, and a man's poverty was always mistaken for his character. For Luna Dawson, who hadn't spoken a word in 15 years, the world was a map of whispers she could hear, but never answer. For Silas Vane, a man with a haunted past and holes in his boots, the world was a place that offered no shelter. When he collapsed in her stable, a broken drifter, and she found him, the mute heiress, neither knew they were about to start a war. He offered her a secret. She offered him a home. And in the unforgiving dust of Redemption Creek, that small act of kindness was enough to get them both killed. The dust of Redemption Creek, Arizona, had a taste. It was iron, salt, and the dry rasp of forgotten promises. Luna Dawson knew the taste well. She felt it on her lips as she walked the grounds of the Dawson Ranch, the vast, sprawling legacy her father, Thomas Dawson, had carved from the desert with his bare hands and stubborn will. Now it was hers. And so was the silence. A fever had stolen Luna's voice at the age of 10. It had left her hearing sharp, almost unnaturally so, but her throat barren. In the 10 years since her father's passing, she had run the ranch with a quiet, unyielding grip that baffled the territory. She communicated with a small slate that hung from a leather thong at her waist, and with a series of precise, graceful signs her father had helped her develop. Her foreman, Bartholomew Bart Hodge, tolerated her. He was a barrel-chested man with a sun-scorched neck and eyes the color of muddy water. He'd worked for her father, and upon Thomas's death had assumed Luna's silence meant she was simple-minded. He ran the day-to-day operations with a loud, swaggering authority, often interpreting her written instructions to his own benefit. Luna was not simple. She was watchful. She saw the new brands on cattle that weren't hers mixed into a herd, and she saw the inflated invoices for feed that never seemed to arrive. But she was biding her time, a lone woman navigating a world of loud, dangerous men. On a biting November night, the wind howling like a mourning widow, Luna was drawn from the main house. Her prize mare, Starlight, was due to foal, and Luna trusted no one, least of all Bart, with the berth. She wrapped a thick wool shawl around her shoulders and, lantern in hand, made her way to the cavernous stable. The stable was warmer than the outside, thick with the scent of hay, leather, and animals. She checked on Starlight, who nickered softly and nudged her hand, not yet in distress. Luna soothed the mare, her movements calm and practiced. Then she heard it. A sound that did not belong. From the darkest, deepest stall, past the tack room, came the sharp, ragged intake of a human breath. It was a sound of profound pain. Luna's hand instinctively went to the small revolver she kept in her apron pocket, a habit her father had insisted upon. She held the lantern high. "Who's there?" she mouthed, though no sound came out. A rustle of straw, then a man's low groan. She moved closer, her light falling on a shape, huddled beneath a threadbare horse blanket. It was a man, and he was shivering violently. He looked up, and his eyes caught the light. They were a startling, clear grey, stark against a face grimed with dirt and stubble. He was young, perhaps 25, but looked as if he'd been worn down by 100 years of hard living. "Ma'am," he rasped, struggling to sit up. "My apologies. Mr. Hodge, he said I could bunk here. Didn't mean to." He was cut off by a wince of agony, his hand clutching his side. Luna recognized him. He was one of the new hands Hodge had hired 2 days prior, a drifter, she'd assumed. She'd seen Hodge berating him near the corral, the man's head bowed, taking the verbal abuse with a quiet stillness. She lowered the lantern, her eyes narrowing in assessment. She saw the worn-out boots, the jacket that was too thin for the season. Then she saw the dark, wet stain spreading through the hay beneath his hand. He wasn't just cold, he was wounded. She lifted her slate and chalked quickly, the scritch-scritch of the chalk loud in the quiet stable. She held it up. "You are hurt." He nodded, his breath fogging. It's just a graze, Mom. From before. Got a bit infected is all. I'll be fine." He tried to stand, perhaps to prove it, but a wave of dizziness sent him crashing back into the hay. His face was pale and slick with a feverish sweat. He looked at her with a desperate, raw shame that struck her harder than a physical blow. "I sleep in the stable," he whispered, as if confessing a mortal sin. "The bunkhouse is full. Mr. Hodge said I wasn't worth a cot till I'd proven my keep." Luna stared at him. This was Bart's cruelty, plain and simple. Leaving a man, an injured man, to fester in the cold. She saw the fever in his eyes, the deep tremor in his hands. He wouldn't last 2 more nights like this. She made a decision. It was swift, certain, and absolute. She wiped the slate clean with the heel of her glove. Her movements were not hesitant. They were fluid and definitive. She wrote, and the grey-eyed man squinted in the lantern light to read the words. "Tonight," she signed softly, her fingers forming the familiar words to reinforce the chalk. "You'll rest in my home." Silas Vane had not known kindness in so long, he barely recognized its shape. When the silent woman held the slate up, he thought the fever was making him see things, but her eyes were firm. She held the lantern out, an invitation. Leaning on her, a slight woman who possessed a strength that belied her frame, was the most humiliating and grounding experience of his life. He tried to bear his own weight, but the infection in his side, a bullet graze he'd gotten weeks ago outside Santa Fe, which had festered from neglect, had sapped his strength. They moved like ghosts through the freezing night, from the stable to the grand, dark shape of the main house. The Dawson Ranch house was a fortress of timber and stone, the largest home in the valley. Luna pushed open the kitchen door. The warmth of the banked hearth fire washed over them. She guided him to a small, sturdy chair by the table. "Mom, I can't," he protested, looking at the clean, polished floor. I'm filthy." She simply pointed to the chair again, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Then she lit an oil lamp, and the kitchen bloomed in soft yellow. She moved to the dry sink, pouring water from a pitcher into a basin, her movements economical and silent. She returned not with a doctor, but with a wooden box. It contained bandages, a bottle of carbolic, and a sharp, clean-looking knife. She placed it on the table. Then she looked at him and pointed to his shirt. "Take it off." A flush of heat, unrelated to the fever, rose on his neck. But her gaze was clinical, impersonal. He was a problem to be solved, like a leaking roof or a lame horse. He gritted his teeth and slowly, agonizingly, pulled the torn, bloody shirt over his head. The wound was ugly. A long, puckered gash along his ribs, inflamed and weeping, the skin around it a violent red. Luna's breath hitched, a tiny, almost inaudible sound. She soaked a rag in the water, her hands gentle but firm as she began to clean the wound. Silas hissed, his knuckles white on the table. "Sorry, ma'am," he muttered, ashamed of his weakness. She paused and looked at his face. She shook her head once, a small, sharp motion. "Don't be." She didn't write it. He just understood it. The work was agonizing. She cleaned the infection with the biting acid, her touch surprisingly steady. He focused on her hands to distract himself. They were not the soft, pale hands of a gentlewoman. They were strong, calloused from rains and work, but her fingers were long and graceful. As she worked, The kitchen door creaked open. "Miss Luna," I heard. A stout woman in a flannel nightgown stood frozen in the doorway, her hair in a grey braid. This was Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, who had been with Luna since she was a child. Mrs. Gable's eyes went from Luna to the half-naked, filthy drifter at the table, to the blood and pus on the rag in Luna's hand. Her face paled in horror. "Miss Luna!" she gasped, clutching her robe. "What is this? Who is this man? Get him out! Have you lost your mind?" Luna didn't flinch. She finished wrapping a clean white bandage around Silas's torso, securing it with a knot. Then she turned to the housekeeper. She picked up her slate and wrote, "He is hurt. He works for us. He was in the stable. It was not Christian to leave him. Christian, it is not proper to have this vagrant in your kitchen, in your house. What will people say? What will Mr. Hodge say?" Luna's eyes flashed. She wrote again, underlining the word so hard the chalk squeaked. "I do not care what Mr. Hodge says. This is my house. He will stay in the servants' annex. See to it. He needs broth and sleep." Mrs. Gable looked as if she'd been slapped. She had long been accustomed to Luna's silence, but she, like Bart, had forgotten the steel beneath it. She gave Silas a look of profound distrust, but nodded stiffly. "As you wish, Miss Luna." Luna led Silas to a small, clean room off the kitchen, once used for a live-in cook. It was simple, with a cot and a wash-stand, but to Silas it felt like a palace. It was warm. It was clean. I don't know how to thank you, Mum," he said, sinking onto the cot, the world spinning from blood loss and relief. Luna paused at the door. She looked at him, her head tilted. Then she raised her hand, and for the first time she offered him a small, hesitant smile. She pulled the door quietly closed, leaving him in the safest place he'd been in over a year. The next morning, the scandal broke. Silas, weak but no longer feverish, emerged from the annex room just as Bart Hodge stamped onto the back porch, expecting his morning coffee from Mrs. Gable. Hodge stopped dead. He saw Silas, clean-shaven, Luna had left a razor, and wearing a borrowed shirt, stepping out of the main house. Hodge's face went from confusion to a dark, furious crimson. "You!" he snarled. "What in the hell are you doing coming out of her house?" "Mr. Hodge," Silas said, his voice weak but steady. "Miss Dawson found me. I was unwell." "Unwell?" Hodge spat, advancing on him. "You were told to sleep in the stable, you worthless drifter. You sneak into her house, molest a poor, simple-minded, mute girl." "That's not what happened," Silas said, straightening up, though it cost him a sharp pain in his side. "I don't care what happened," Hodge roared, loud enough for the other hands in the nearby bunkhouse to hear. "You're fired. Get off this ranch before I have you horsewhipped. He will not be leaving." The voice was not a voice. It was the sharp slap of a small slate being placed on the porch railing. Luna stood in the doorway, dressed for the day. She was paler than usual, but her eyes were chips of ice. Hodge spun around, his fury momentarily checked by her presence. He softened his tone, as one does to a child. "Now, Miss Luna, this man is a vagrant. He took advantage of you. He can't stay." Luna wrote, "He is not a vagrant. He is my new bookkeeper." Hodge blinked. Then he laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Bookkeeper? Miss Luna, he's a stable hand. He can barely read, I'd wager." Silas spoke. "I can read, Mr. Hodge. I can also write, and I am rather proficient with numbers." Hodge's eyes narrowed, shifting between Silas and Luna. He saw for the first time a connection, an alliance. It was a threat to the comfortable, profitable system he had built. "We'll see about this," Hodge said, his voice dropping to a low menace. The town council won't stand for this. A woman like you need protection. You don't know what you're doing." He stormed off toward the stables, shouting for the other hands. Luna watched him go, her expression flat. She turned to Silas. "He is wrong," she wrote. "I know exactly what I am doing." She handed him the slate. "Now, come to the study. If you are my bookkeeper, let us see the books." The study was Thomas Dawson's sanctuary, and Luna had kept it exactly as he'd left it. It was panelled in dark wood, dominated by a massive oak desk and shelves overflowing with books. It smelled of leather, tobacco, and old paper. Silas entered with a reverence that surprised Mrs. Gable, who watched from the hallway. He didn't gawk at the wealth. He ran a finger along the spine of a copy of Leviathan. "My father was a reader," Silas said quietly, more to himself than to Luna. He believed a man who could read could build a new world. Luna watched him, her curiosity piqued. This was no ordinary drifter. She pointed to the large, dusty ledgers on the desk. Bart Hodges' books were a chaotic mess of loose receipts, scribbled notes, and pages with numbers that simply didn't add up. For 2 days, Silas and Luna worked. Mrs. Gable, her disapproval warring with her fascination, brought them trays of food. The communication between them became a fluid dance. He would point to an entry, raising an eyebrow. She would nod or shake her head, pulling a corresponding invoice from a drawer Hodge had long ignored. "Mr. Hodge," Silas said on the 3rd day, his voice stronger, his side healing. "He's listed 50 head of cattle sold to a Mr. L.G. Peters in Tucson. The price is very low." Luna nodded. She retrieved a different book, her father's private branding registry. She flipped through it. Then she scribbled on her slate, "There is no Mr. L.G. Peters. And those cattle brands, they are not ours. They belong to the Ladder Rock Ranch, 2 valleys over." Silas sat back, a low whistle escaping his lips. "He's not just skimming, Luna. He's moving stolen cattle through your ranch, using your books to launder them, and pocketing the difference." He looked at her, realizing the gravity of what he'd just said. He had just accused her foreman, a man with the loyalty of the entire bunk house, of a hanging offense, and he had called her Luna. He flushed. "Apologies, Ma'am. Miss Dawson." She met his gaze. She picked up the slate, wrote 1 word, and held it up. "Luna." Then she smiled, a true, bright smile that lit up her entire face. It made her beautiful. In that moment, Silas Vane, a man running from his own name, felt a dangerous, unfamiliar crack in the armor around his heart. He was beginning to care what happened to this ranch. He was beginning to care what happened to her. The work gave him purpose, but his presence in the house was a storm cloud. By the end of the week, Redemption Creek was buzzing. Bart Hodge had seen to it. "He's in the house," Hodge told the men at the Dusty Spur saloon. "A half-starved wolf she's let into the henhouse, and her, a simple-minded mute. He'll kill her in her sleep and take the place." The town banker, Mr. Croft, a man who held the mortgage on nearly every other property except the Dawson Ranch, grew concerned. The stability of the Dawson spread affected the whole valley's economy. On Friday, Sheriff Brody rode out. Sheriff Brody was a pragmatic man, not cruel like Hodge, but tired. He'd seen too much to be an optimist. He found Luna and Silas on the front porch, reviewing a shipping manifest. "Miss Dawson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "And Mr. Vane. That is your name, isn't it?" Silas tensed. "It is. I've come out on a matter of concern. The town is worried, Luna." He still called her by her first name, a relic of when her father was alive. "Hodge says you've taken this man in, fired him from the stables, and now he's living here. It ain't proper." Luna calmly wrote. Mr. Vane is my accountant. Mr. Hodge is a thief. I have proof. Brody sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Proof? Luna, that's a heavy accusation. Bart Hodge has been here 20 years. And he's been stealing for at least 10, Silas said, stepping forward. Sheriff, look at these ledgers. The discrepancies are blatant. Before Brody could respond, a second rider galloped up the drive, his horse lathered. It was the young deputy, breathless. Sheriff, the new posters just came in on the telegraph wire. You need to see this. The deputy handed Brody a piece of paper. Brody unrolled it. His eyes scanned the text, and his face hardened. He looked up, his gaze fixing not on Silas, but past him, at the house. Well, Mr. Vane, Sheriff Brody said, his voice now flat and official. It seems you've been less than honest. This poster just came in from the U.S. Marshals. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. I don't know what you... It's a wanted poster for a man named Marcus Vane, wanted for bank robbery, armed assault, and the murder of a Pinkerton agent in Colorado. Luna's hand flew to her mouth, her slate clattering to the porch. And who, the sheriff continued, his hand dropping to the butt of his revolver, is Marcus Vane? Silas closed his eyes, the past he had been running from finally catching him. He's my brother, Silas whispered. And the poster says I was with him, doesn't it? Brody nodded grimly. It says known associate, Silas Vane. Approach with extreme caution. Armed and extremely dangerous. The silence on the porch was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling under the eaves. Mrs. Gable, who had come to the door, let out a strangled sob. Luna stared at Silas. Her face was a mask of shock, her eyes wide and searching. He saw the flicker of betrayal in them, and it cut him deeper than the bullet graze. It's a lie, Silas said, his voice ragged. I wasn't there. Marcus, he did it. He's always done things like this. He used my name to get the hotel room, to buy the horses. He set me up. I've been running ever since, trying to get far enough away that his shadow wouldn't find me. A likely story, son, Sheriff Brody said, shaking his head. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We'll hold you in the town jail until the marshal can get here. No! The word was a desperate, choked sound, barely a whisper of air. It came from Luna. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her whole body trembling. She hadn't made a sound in 15 years. The men stared at her. She seemed to realize what she'd done and pressed her hands to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears of frustration. But the desperation had turned to fire. She snatched up her slate. Her handwriting was furious, a jagged slash of chalk. He is innocent. Luna, Brody said softly, you can't know that. You've known him a week. He's a wanted man. I know Bart Hodge. I know a liar. And I know a thief. She pointed a trembling finger at the ledgers Silas had so carefully organized on the porch table. This is the crime in Redemption Creek, not him. She grabbed the top ledger and shoved it into Sheriff Brody's chest. Look. Page 14. Seed purchase, $500. Here is the invoice, from the Miller Feed and Seed. She then pulled a smaller, leather-bound book from her apron. Her father's contacts. There is no Miller Feed and Seed in Prescott. There never has been. He forged it. Page 20. Barbed wire. $800. The wire was delivered to the Double H Ranch, Bart's brother's ranch. She was flipping pages, pulling invoices, her movements sharp and certain. She was not a simple-minded mute. She was a detective. She was an owner. She had been building her case for a year, waiting for an ally she could trust. Brody, caught off guard by her ferocity, found himself examining the documents. The evidence was meticulous. It was undeniable. Bart Hodge was a prolific thief. This is... Brodie looked from the ledgers to Luna. "This is thorough, Luna. This is real." "It's all there, Sheriff," Silas said, finding his voice. "He's been bleeding this ranch dry." Just then, Bart Hodge himself rode up, a smug look on his face. He'd likely seen the deputy arrive and expected to witness Silas being dragged away in chains. "Sheriff," Hodge boomed, swinging off his horse. "Glad you're here. Taking this trash out?" Sheriff Brodie turned slowly. He refolded the wanted poster and tucked it in his pocket. Then he held up one of the forged invoices Luna had provided. "Bartholomew Hodge," Brodie said, his voice all business. "I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and cattle rustling." Hodge's smirk vanished, replaced by stunned, mottled fury. "What? You're taking her side? A mute half-wit and a wanted killer? That's madness." "Her half-wit just built a case that would convince a blind judge, Bart. And as for Mr. Vane..." Brodie looked at Silas, then at Luna, who was standing protectively near Silas, her gaze unwavering. "The poster lists him as an associate," Brodie said, making a decision. "It doesn't say he pulled any triggers. Until the marshal gets here and clarifies, I'm deputizing him as my guard. His first duty is to protect you, Miss Dawson, and this ranch, from any associates of Mr. Hodge who might not like this." It was a brilliant, pragmatic move. It kept Silas from fleeing, it protected Luna, and it solved Brodie's immediate problem. "You can't do this!" Hodge roared, his hand instinctively dropping to his gun. "Don't, Bart," Brodie warned. But Hodge was too proud and too cornered. He drew his pistol. He never cleared the holster. Silas, moving with a speed that belied his quiet nature, tackled Hodge at the knees, sending them both sprawling into the dust. The gun went skittering across the yard. The deputy had Hodge in cuffs before he could catch his breath. "Get him on his horse," Brodie ordered, his voice grim. He looked at Silas, who was breathing heavily, his wound pulling. "You move fast for an accountant." I've had to," Silas panted. Brodie nodded, his expression complex. "I'll send a telegram to the marshal in Denver. I'll tell him about your brother. And I'll tell him what you just did. It might buy you some goodwill." As the sheriff and his deputy led the cursing, struggling Bart Hodge away, Luna and Silas were left alone on the porch. The dust began to settle. Silas finally turned to her. He was waiting for the accusation, the fear. Luna walked up to him. She looked at his face, then at the healing wound at his side. Finally, she met his eyes. She raised her hands, and with slow, deliberate care, she signed, "I believe you." Silas felt the tight, cold knot of fear he'd lived with for months finally unravel. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath until he let it out. He nodded, unable to speak. Luna then wrote on her slate, "Now the real work begins. You are my new foreman, Mr. Vane. The ranch is in disarray, and..." She paused, a shadow crossing her face. "What?" he signed back, the simple gesture he'd picked up from her. "If your brother is wanted, he will hear what happened here. He will know you have found a home. She didn't have to write the rest, and he will come to take it from you." The fall gave way to a biting, early winter. With Bart Hodge in the Prescott jail awaiting trial and his cronies in the bunkhouse summarily fired, the Dawson Ranch underwent a transformation. Silas, now foreman, worked from sunup to sundown. He was fair with the new hands he hired, men who respected Luna's ownership and Silas's quiet, competent authority. He was a natural leader, not through noise, but through example. He mended fences alongside them. He broke the ice on the troughs with them, and he treated them as men, not assets. But his true partnership was with Luna. Their evenings were spent in the study, the ledgers now balanced and clean. Their communication had evolved beyond the slate. Silas, a quick study with a desperate need to understand her, began to learn her sign language. It started simply. Water, horse, fence, good, bad. Soon it became more complex. He learned the sign for sunset, for father, for lonely. One evening, Luna brought out a small, tarnished silver music box. She opened it, and a tinny, beautiful melody played. She watched it, her expression profoundly sad. "My mother's," she signed, her fingers moving like butterflies. "She died when I was born." Silas watched her, his heart aching. He saw the isolation she had lived in, a silence built of grief and circumstance. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently touching the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. The ranch began to thrive. The cattle were healthy. The books were balanced. Mr. Croft, the banker, had personally ridden out to apologize to Miss Dawson, his hat in his hand, offering her a line of credit she did not need. The town of Redemption Creek, which had once pitied her, now spoke of her with a new, grudging respect. The Mute Duchess, they called her, a name mixing awe and distance. Sheriff Brody had sent his telegram. The reply from the U.S. Marshal was non-committal. Silas Vane was still a person of interest, but given the circumstances, the Marshal would divert his attention to more pressing matters unless Marcus Vane was sighted in the territory. For a few weeks there was peace, a fragile, hopeful peace that felt like a new beginning. Then the devil rode in. He didn't look like a devil. He looked like Silas, but as if drawn by a more confident, reckless hand. He was taller, broader, with the same grey eyes, but where Silas's held caution, his held a chilling amusement. He wore a fine, tailored coat and rode a magnificent black stallion. He rode straight up to the Dusty Spur saloon, dismounted, and pushed through the batwing doors. The saloon went quiet. He smiled, a flash of white teeth. "Whiskey," he said to the bartender, "and information." He tossed a gold coin on the bar. "I'm looking for my little brother, Silas Vane." The name hit the room like a gunshot. The bartender froze. "Never heard of him?" The bartender lied. "Badly." The man's smile widened. "Don't lie to me, friend. I heard a rumor he'd fallen in with the rich mute girl out at the Dawson spread. Heard he's playing foreman." He took a sip of his whiskey. "My brother always did like to play house." It was Marcus Vane, and he had come for his brother. Back at the ranch, Silas was repairing a harness on the porch. Luna was sitting nearby, reading a book. The winter sun was low, painting the hills in shades of orange and purple. It was quiet. Silas looked up, his work done. He signed to her, his movements still a little clumsy, but clear. "You are good." She smiled and signed back. "I am good. You are cold. Come inside." He was about to when he saw the rider, a single, dark figure on the ridge, silhouetted against the dying light. The figure wasn't moving. He was just watching. A cold dread, familiar and sharp, settled in Silas's stomach. "Luna," he said, his voice low. He didn't need to sign. The urgency in his tone made her look up. She followed his gaze to the rider. She looked at Silas, her eyes wide with a question. He nodded grimly. "It's him," he said. "It's Marcus." As if summoned, the rider spurred his horse, galloping down the ridge, not toward the road, but straight for the house. He rode with a terrifying, arrogant confidence, and he was alone. He reined his horse to a dramatic stop in the yard, dust billowing. He swung down, his long coat falling open to reveal 2 pearl-handled revolvers. "Silas, brother!" Marcus Vane boomed, his voice overflowing with false cheer. "You are a hard man to find. And look at this, a veritable palace. You've done well." Silas stood up from the porch step, placing himself between Marcus and the front door, where Luna stood frozen. "What do you want, Marcus?" Silas's voice was flat, dead. "What do I want? I want to see my brother." Marcus walked closer, his eyes scanning the house, the stables, the fine porch. "And to meet the lady of the house?" His gaze landed on Luna. He slowly, mockingly removed his hat. "Ma'am, Marcus Vane at your service. My brother, he hasn't been entirely truthful, has he? He's not an accountant. He's a thief. Just like me. Only I'm better at it." "He's lying," Silas signed quickly to Luna, not taking his eyes off Marcus. "Oh, you've taught her your little language," Marcus chuckled. "How sweet. No, Silas, I'm not lying. Tell her about the bank in Leadville, the one before Colorado. Tell her whose idea it was to hit the payroll wagon." Silas's face went white. "That's what I thought," Marcus sneered. "Silas has the ideas, you see. He's the smart one. I'm just the one with the conviction to see it through." "That was a lifetime ago, Marcus. I was a kid. I paid that money back," Silas said, his voice shaking. "It doesn't matter. The point is, brother, you've got a taint, just like me. And these good people? They'll find out. Sheriff Brody? He'll find out. And this pretty, silent little bird," he took a step toward the porch, "she'll find out." "Stay away from her," Silas growled. "Or what?" Marcus stopped, suddenly all business. "I need money, Silas, a lot of it. And I need a place to lie low. My gang will be here in 2 days. We're heading south to Mexico. This ranch, it's the perfect way station." "No," Silas said. "You're not welcome here. You're not bringing your trouble to her door." "It's already here," Marcus said, his smile vanishing. "You brought it. You have 2 days, Silas. Get me $5,000, cash, from your little duchess or her bank, and have the pantry stocked for 6 men. And if I don't?" Marcus looked past Silas, his eyes landing on Luna. His voice was soft, conversational, and more terrifying than any shout. "Then I'll burn this place to the ground, and I'll start with her." He put his hat back on, tipped the brim, and swung onto his horse. 2 days, brother. It's good to be home." He rode off, whistling. Silas was left shaking, not from cold, but from a rage so profound it made him sick. He turned to Luna. Her face was pale, but her eyes were not on the retreating figure of Marcus. They were on Silas. She was searching his face, looking for the truth. "Leadville?" she signed, her hands trembling. Silas bowed his head, the shame of his past suffocating him. "I was 18, Luna. My father had just died. Marcus. He said it was easy. I told him the wagon's route. I never touched the money. But I was guilty. I was." He looked up, expecting to see her walk away, to see the door he'd been welcomed through, finally shut in his face. Instead, she walked down the steps. She stood in front of him. She reached up and put her hand on his cheek, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You are not him," she signed. "You are not your brother." She then pointed to the house. "This is our home." Then she pointed to him, and then to herself. "We defend it." Silas looked at her, at this small, silent woman who had faced down her foreman, her town, and now a murderous outlaw, all for him. The last wall around his heart crumbled to dust. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "We do." The next 48 hours were a blur of tense, silent preparation. Silas rode to town under the cover of darkness. He didn't go to Sheriff Brody. Not yet. Brody was a good man, but he was one man, and he was bound by the law. If Brody arrested Silas, Marcus would still come for the ranch. Instead, Silas went to the bunkhouse. He gathered the 6 hands he trusted, men he'd hired himself. He laid it all out. My brother is coming. He's an outlaw, and he's bringing his gang. He aims to rob the Redemption Creek Miners' Trust and use the Dawson Ranch as his bolt hole. He threatened Miss Dawson." A quiet, grim understanding passed between the men. They weren't soldiers, but they were loyal. Luna Dawson and Silas Vane had treated them with respect, paid them a fair wage, and given them a decent home. "He'll have to come through us, Foreman," a grizzled older hand named Dusty said, checking his rifle. "He will," Silas said, "but not here, not at the house. We can't let him get near Luna. We stop him in town." Silas then went to Sheriff Brody. He woke him at his small house. He told him everything, including the Leadville confession. Brody listened, sipping stale coffee. "Damn you, Vane. You should have told me." "You would have had to arrest me. Marcus would have won," Silas replied. Brody looked at Silas, seeing the man he'd become, not the name on the poster. "He's robbing Croft's bank, you say? That man's a fool, but it's my town. My bank." "He'll hit it at noon tomorrow," Silas said. "He thinks I'll be there, with the $5,000, waiting to hand it over. He's using me as his inside man, whether I like it or not." "He's underestimating you," Brody said. "He's underestimating Luna," Silas corrected. "She's the one who came up with the plan." The plan was simple, and it was dangerous. The next day, Redemption Creek was quiet. Too quiet. Shopkeepers, warned by Brody, had shuttered their windows. Townsfolk stayed inside. At 11:45 a.m., Marcus Vane and his 5 men rode down the main street. They were laughing, casual, as if they were riding to a Sunday picnic. Silas stood on the boardwalk, in front of the bank, holding a leather satchel. Marcus reined in, his men fanning out. "Brother, you came, and you brought the gift?" "The money's inside, Marcus," Silas said, his voice carrying in the still air. "Mr. Croft is nervous. He wants to hand it to you himself." Marcus's eyes narrowed. This was a deviation. "Is that so? You go get it." "He won't give it to me. He's terrified. He'll only give it to the famous Marcus Vane," Silas said, laying the flattery on thick. Marcus's vanity won. He chuckled. "Well, I can't disappoint my public." He dismounted. "You 3, stay with the horses. You 2, with me." Marcus and his 2 men, their hands on their guns, walked up the boardwalk. Silas opened the bank door for them. The bank was empty, save for a terrified-looking Mr. Croft and Sheriff Brody, who was standing by the vault, his hands up. "Sheriff, what a pleasure," Marcus sneered. "Here to make a deposit?" Just overseeing the transaction, Vane," Brody said. "Good. Croft, the money." Mr. Croft nervously pointed to the open vault. "In the bag, Mr. Vane, just as he requested." One of Marcus's men went into the vault. The other kept his gun on Brody. Marcus watched Silas. "You're awfully calm, little brother. You're not thinking of turning heroic, are you?" "Just want you gone, Marcus," Silas said. The man emerged from the vault. "It's all here, boss. Heavy, too." "Excellent," Marcus smiled. "Well, gentlemen, it's been a single sharp sound cracked the air. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the clang of the town's fire bell, ringing loud and fast from the church tower, 2 blocks away." Marcus whipped his head toward the sound. "What is that?" "Fire!" a man shouted from the street. Marcus's men by the horses looked up, distracted. From the rooftops on both sides of the street, Silas's ranch hands and a few deputized townsfolk stood up. "Now, Sheriff!" Silas yelled. Brody, Silas, and Croft dropped to the floor. From the rooftops, a volley of rifle fire rained down. It wasn't aimed at the men, it was aimed at the horses. The 3 outlaws in the street scattered, their transportation screaming and falling. "It's a trap!" Marcus roared. He grabbed Silas, pulling him up as a human shield. "You set me up! You set me up!" He dragged Silas toward the door, firing his pistol into the street. His 2 men in the bank returned fire at Brodie, who was sheltered behind a thick desk. But the plan was not the bank. The bank was just the bait. As Marcus dragged Silas onto the boardwalk, he looked toward the fire bell, and his blood ran cold. Standing in the bell tower, pulling the rope, was Luna. She had refused to stay at the ranch. "They will see me. They will know the town is with us. They will panic." She was the signal. That bitch," Marcus snarled. He raised his pistol, not at the men shooting, but at the bell tower. "No," Silas screamed. He slammed his elbow back into Marcus's ribs, the exact spot where he himself had been wounded. Marcus howled in pain, his shot going wide. Silas broke free, diving behind a water trough. The street erupted into a full-blown gunfight. Marcus's men were pinned. 1 went down, the other 2 surrendered. But Marcus was not a man who surrendered. He was enraged. He had been tricked by his weak brother and a mute girl. He saw Luna now running from the church tower, heading for the alley that led back toward the livery. Marcus ignored the bullets. He sprinted, cutting through the general store to intercept her. "Luna!" Silas screamed, seeing him. He ran after him, Brodie shouting his name. Marcus burst into the back alley just as Luna ran past. He grabbed her, clamping a hand over her mouth, a useless, cruel gesture. You cost me everything," he hissed, dragging her behind a stack of barrels as Silas and Brodie skidded into the alley. "Let her go, Marcus," Silas yelled, his pistol shaking. "Drop it, Silas. Drop it, or I swear to God I'll snap her neck," Marcus yelled, his arm tightening around Luna's throat. Luna was terrified, but she was not weak. She could hear Silas's voice. She could hear Marcus's labored, angry breathing. She was not a damsel. She was the owner of the Dawson Ranch. Marcus was using her as a shield, his gun pointed at Silas. "I'm walking out of here, brother, and she's my ticket." Luna looked at Silas. Her eyes were sharp. She mouthed a single word. "Now." Silas's eyes widened. "What?" Marcus was ranting. "You thought you could be him, didn't you? The big man! You're nothing but a coward," Luna acted. With all her strength, she stomped her boot heel down onto Marcus's instep, a metal-reinforced heel striking bone. Marcus roared in agony, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Luna needed. She bit him. She sank her teeth into the forearm he had wrapped around her neck, biting down with the desperate strength of a cornered animal. He screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and pain, and his arm flew back. Luna dropped to the ground, curling into a ball. For 1 second, Silas and Marcus were staring at each other. No shields, no tricks. 2 shots rang out. They sounded as one. Marcus Vane stared, his eyes wide with surprise. A dark red stain appeared on his chest. He looked down, then up at Silas. He tried to say something, but only a bloody cough came out. He crumpled to the ground. Silas stood, his gun smoking. He was untouched. Marcus's last shot had gone wide, splintering the barrel beside him. Silence. Silas's gun fell from his numb hand. He ran to Luna, who was pushing herself up, shaking. He pulled her to her feet, his hands checking her for wounds. She was fine. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, his whole body shaking with the aftershock. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over." Luna clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. She held him, her hands gripping his shirt, as if she would never let go. She could feel his heart hammering against her. She was safe. He was safe. She tilted her head back. She looked up at his face, her own streaked with dust and tears. She raised one trembling hand. "Home," she signed. "Go home." The U.S. Marshal who arrived in Redemption Creek 2 days later was a stern, humorless man named Elias Thorne. He had come expecting to arrest a Vane, and he found one. He just hadn't expected him to be dead. He listened to Sheriff Brody's report. He listened to Mr. Croft's effusive, borderline hysterical praise of Silas and the brave Miss Dawson. He interviewed the ranch hands. Finally, he sat with Silas in Sheriff Brody's office. "The warrant for your arrest as an associate. It's void," Thorne said gruffly. "You assisting in the capture and neutralization of a known felon clears your name, especially since your brother confessed to the Colorado job being his alone, according to Sheriff Brody." "He did," Brody confirmed, lying smoothly. "Your name is cleared, Vane," Thorne said. "You're free to go." Silas nodded. "Thank you, Marshal." "One thing," Thorne said, pausing at the door. "You're a fast man with a gun. Faster than your brother, and he was known to be quick. Why were you drifting, sleeping in stables?" Silas looked at his hands. "Because, Marshal, I'm not him. I didn't want to be. I was running from his name, but I was also running from myself. I was afraid of what I was capable of. And now," Silas met his gaze, "now I know what I'm capable of. I'm capable of building a home. I'm capable of protecting it." Thorne nodded once, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Good day, Mr. Vane." When Silas rode back to the ranch, he found it transformed. The fear that had hung over it was gone, replaced by the bustle of work. The hands tipped their hats, calling out, "Foreman." He found Luna in the stable, the place where he had first seen her. She was checking on Starlight, the mare who had finally foaled. A long-legged, wobbly colt stood by its mother's side. She heard his footsteps and turned. He didn't need the slate. He didn't need words. He just walked to her. He stood in front of her for a long moment, simply looking. He saw the strength that had saved him. He saw the intelligence that had outsmarted Hodge. He saw the compassion that had brought a drifter in from the cold. She watched him, waiting. He raised his hands. He was clumsy, his fingers calloused and stiff, but his meaning was unmistakable. "My home is here." She smiled, a slow, radiant smile. "With me," he signed, his heart in his throat. Luna's eyes filled with tears, but they were not sad. She reached out, taking his larger, rougher hand in her own. She lifted it, not to her face, or to his. She pressed his hand flat against her chest, directly over her heart. She held it there, letting him feel the steady, strong, living beat. She held his gaze, her own eyes fierce and bright and full of a love that needed no sound. He understood. It was a yes. It was always. It was everything. He leaned in and kissed her, gently, on the mouth. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of arrival. It was the kiss of a man who had been lost and had just, finally, found his way. In the quiet of the stable, with the scent of hay and new life around them, the two silent figures held each other. Luna Dawson, the woman who could not speak, and Silas Vane, the man who had been silenced by his past, had finally found a language that belonged only to them. True courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet, stubborn voice of a woman who refuses to be broken. And true redemption isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building a future, even when your hands are shaking. Luna and Silas started as two broken people, a silent woman and a haunted man, hiding in the shadows of the West. But together, they proved that you don't need a voice to speak the truth, and you don't need a clean name to have a good heart. They found in each other what the world had denied them. A home. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were moved by Luna and Silas's journey, please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a story of resilience and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more dramas like this one. Click that bell icon so you never miss an update. What part of their story touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read everyone.